Travis, great to see you again. It's been almost 1 year, I think exactly 11 months since our last interview. And back then, you had made $210,000 as a result of your business. So, quite a substantial amount. And since it's been a year, I'm sure you have quite a bit to update us on, not just financially, but probably in life as well. So, let's begin simple. How are you doing? How's everything going for you?
Yeah, doing well. I mean, last time we spoke, I was in the middle of renovation chaos. So essentially, all of my bottom floor was ripped up. I had pipes and essentially no bathroom, and a business and small children, which is not a great combination to have, especially when you only really just started it and was starting to ramp up everything at that particular time. So it was a somewhat hectic time period, but yeah, one thing which we've overcome.
Mhm. So let's speak about the overcoming part. If we were to go by timeline, in those 11 months, what do you remember that's significant to actually update on? Let's say in chronological order.
Yeah, so there was quite a few things. So at that point in time, we were ramping up and planning a lot for Christmas. I work predominantly within e-commerce sales and selling it through media companies, loyalty programs, all sorts of different sales platforms. And essentially, we were trying to prepare what we would expect throughout the Christmas period, and then beyond. Likewise, trying to add more customers in different sectors, but also be able to try and ramp them up as soon as possible from the learnings in which we've gotten from the first customer. Because when we first met, business was very much in its infancy. We had the first customer which had come in, starting to generate sales, which was a result of the 200 odd thousand in which we'd done, and then essentially from the start of this year, that's when we really hit the gas and started adding more customers, adding more products, and making sure that we try and make this a successful business rather than just a hobby business, which you could essentially call it in the beginning.
Mhm. Did you automate your actual processes for fulfilling client needs?
Yes, a lot. So we looked over all the individual processes that we could do, and when we built the company, we essentially built it based upon what is value to us and how is value portrayed. So, value for us was in two fields, which what is going to generate us money and what is going to save us time, which can then result in earning us money. So, we looked at the different parts of our business in which we could automate and then progressively added different stages of automation depending on the complexity of the particular part of the business.
Mhm.
Um, Adding automation is something in which is always going to take time, and you need to try and perfect it so you don't get it right from the very beginning. However, a decent amount of planning went in to ensure that when we did execute on something that we had planned to automate, then it worked fairly smoothly out of the box.
Mhm. And what kind of automation was it? Did you implement any kind of AI or was it a different kind?
Yeah, we added some AI in certain areas, specifically within coding, improving that, a lot of scripting work in terms of repeatable tasks in which are just generally like data fulfillment or uh, order handling or anything to do with shipment payments to a certain extent. So I think there's a lot of learnings which can be had with AI, but we're still very much in its infancy of how it can be applied to actual business problems. A lot of it is about generation of uh, clips or images. I think personalization of emails is starting to come and be popular now, but we used it predominantly for manual data entry tasks or things in which needed to be interconnected between systems.
Mhm. And what kind of other automation then did you implement?
A lot to do with process flows. So our system is very much designed of creating a aggregation of multiple different merchants' products in which we can essentially sell in a singular storefront. and being able to add new connections, new stores, predominantly via API, and then making sure that the process of having the product in which it's coming from their source, running into our system, being put in front of customers, being sold, being sent back to the merchant for the distribution, updating all the statuses, that all of those intertwined and interlocked as much as possible. And in the very beginning, there was a lot of manual processes and hand holding, but now that process from essentially start to end is more or less automated.
Hmm. And how long did it take to actually get it automated? Because I'm assuming when you said things started really picking up beginning of the year, was that once everything was already automated, or was that still in the process of automation?
Bit of both. At the start of the year, that's when we also added our second larger customer from the learnings and the automations which we put in place towards the end of the year. And so it allowed us to be able to go out and sell to more customers and effectively be able to remove the manual work in which we had to be able to uh, free up that time to generate more leads, more customers, and pay attention to more strategic aspects of the business rather than the operations.
Mhm. I think that's very valuable advice. That's why I tried to dig in a bit further, especially what you said about value. It's generating money and saving time, looking at it from that perspective and really simplifying, and then, yeah, just seeing what can be done with that in mind.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can
then,
also think about it
yep.
with like timing of people. Like if you were on a wagey and you're essentially selling your time by the hour. I have the luxury of owning my own company, so I don't have that. But I also price in the idea of what if I have a tool, if I pay for that, if I pay $20 for ChatGPT or for a video processing company or some overlay system, but that saves me 8, 10, 20 hours a month or so, then that $20 is an absolute no brainer because even though it's an upfront cost now, I know that I'm going to save that progressively time and time again. So you got to really put a stamp on your own time as to what is that time worth to me and whether or not that value is going to correlate directly either in like additional ROI or additional time saved, in which you can then free that up to generate more ROI or um, work with more core functionality.
Mhm. Thank you for clarifying. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, do you have a 100% understanding of every aspect of your business, or do you actually just trust someone else to do some part of it
Absolutely
without
not.
fully knowing how it works?
Absolutely not. And I think that's also an age component. So as I've gotten older, and I've worked in large Fortune 500 companies, I've worked in uh, with large teams in which I've operated in. You being the expert in all parts of your business realistically is impossible, especially if you want it done right. So what you're better off doing is having experts within the required fields in which you need for your business to grow and then add those in. And I think that's also a testament to why we've been able to grow very quickly because we've looked at ourselves and said, okay, operationally, we are not strong in this area, or we are wanting to increase our development speed, or we need to work on our design and our UX. Those are the areas in which we've progressively added people which are experts within those fields. And especially if you get people in which are highly competent, ideally sourced from your own network, then you free up a lot of time to be able to focus on the things which are most core for your part of the business. Myself, I dabble in more or less everything which goes on. So I have an overall understanding and know everything that goes on. But I'm not one that's sitting debugging lines of code or tracking the individual orders. That's something in which, if you have sufficient processes in place and you've got people with relevant knowledge, or ideally ones in which you don't have to train, those are the people in which are going to accelerate your business more than if you were to try and do everything. There's the saying like that you're a jack of all trades but master of none. I think that's very, very much true.
Because I think a thought people might have is What if something goes wrong and I don't actually understand how to fix that thing that went wrong, and then I have to trust someone else with it? So in your case, is that just what you do? You trust that other person to solve it without intervening, or is that some kind of intervention there?
Depending on the severity of the instance, I mean, that's something in which if there is executive decisions that need to be made, but there is operational tasks in which the other person is capable of doing, you're the one which is going to step in and be like, okay, this is the problem. We need to fix this. You know how to fix it. Solve solve it. So it's that level of delegation. In certain instances, if you need something done exceptionally quickly, you can jump back into it and do it yourself if you really have to. But it's not something that I would recommend. You would have ideally processes in place for if things like that were to happen. So you can have essentially fallback routines or um, individual contacts within your organization which have that level of responsibility. Um, because if you realistically are trying to grow a business, I'm a product led organization rather than a service led one. I've got to be able to take a step back and let other people do the work if we're ever going to scale. Because as soon as you try and put yourself into each one of those elements, you're losing valuable time which you could be spending doing other things. But you're not trusting in the people in which you have hired. Uh, I think in the council and various other places, there's a lot of advice that I tend to give to sort of younger people starting off. And I think one of the best ones is that if you're going to hire quickly, fire quickly as well. If something is not going to work, or you see that they're not working within that product function, or there's a continual high rate of error, then you're better off getting somebody else in which is going to be able to take that burden from you. Because the last thing you want to do is hire somebody and get an additional job.
Mhm. Okay, makes sense. Um, Although I have heard an argument for the higher fast, fire fast, but obviously context dependent. Maybe that's the majority of the time, but some cases won't be that, but probably not something worth going into.
I
Instead,
think, yeah, yeah.
carry on.
Yeah,
If you have
specialist
any.
knowledge. Specialist knowledge is the exception there. If it's something in which is either core to your business or something which is exceptionally hard to replace, then definitely do so. But you should spend more time focusing on the quality of the people in which you hire. So even though you might have an immediate need and say, okay, I need to have this problem solved now, if you just pick up the first best person that picks up the phone or sends you in an application, those are typically not the people that you want, because the people you want are the ones in which already have a job or already doing something else and that you know have got the skills in which are going to provide for you.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, that's thank you for the clarification. Definitely part of it. I think let me see if I can word this or if it's better to skip. Even for something like a VA job, if you have a rigorous testing in place for the person, you can also get probably better results. As it depends on the volume of applications. If you actually would get a lot of applications for it, then you can afford to take a bit longer to hire and do some rigorous tests for that person to see if they'd actually be a good fit. So maybe hire slower, and then if things go wrong, fire fast. I don't know. It is actually nuanced. And what you say is correct. I don't know why I'm trying to
No.
think of a different angle for it, but yeah.
I,
So I
I
think
think a
we
lot of
can.
people they find that if you put up an open application, you're going to get people, and occasionally you're going to get the right person. So you may get 100 applicants of a role, you might get one, in which is actually really good and is going to qualify for what you want. What you're better off doing is spending your time doing the actual screening of the applicants before screening of people before they become applicants, or that you've got an existing pool or existing network, because the existing network and the people in which you trust are the people in which are going to generate like the biggest return for you, because you can trust them based upon the trust in which you have of others, because you're
Mhm.
essentially doing the character development and the relationship component is already factored in. The main things in which you want to speak to when you add somebody in is, all right, I've already got the check of approval from somebody else within my network that your skill set is what I'm going to need. Now I need to understand whether or not you're going to fit in culturally. Because if you're a dickhead, I don't want to work with you. But if you're a talented dickhead, no, I still don't want to work with you. I prefer to work with somebody in which I'm going to be able to actively have dialogues with that will challenge and fit within the corporate culture, because that's something in which will essentially drag your business down, especially when it comes to motivation.
Hmm. Let's continue along those lines then. What kind of culture have you developed in your business?
What sort of coaching did you say?
Culture.
Culture.
Yes.
I work very much off of the idea of a meritocracy, that people are willing to, they get the praise for the amount of effort in which they're going to put in. So you essentially progress and earn more responsibility, more trust, higher wages based upon the input in which you have in the organization. And I think one thing which is important, and I can do this at this smaller stage of the company because we're only 8 people, is that I give everybody the freedom to be able to debate ideas. It's not that there's a top-down hierarchy which decides everything. There needs to be one to make decisions in the end, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that person which makes all decisions. You've got to give it a certain level of autonomy, but you also have to be able to debate your piece. If you say, "Oh, this isn't working," all right, tell me why it isn't working. Like, explain to me and why you need this functionality or why we should build this object. "Oh, I need it for this and this reason." And then you sort of challenge and you debate each other. So it's very much a combination of constructive criticism and active debating in order to get the most out of people because it challenges them to think. The last thing you want to do is just micromanage people, and say, "Yeah, this is what I think. This is what we're going to do." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Even though I know that this is not what is going to help me or help the organization. So having that healthy level of debate is something which is really important in company culture because it also hashes out any disagreements that you potentially have, and it doesn't have things just festering under the surface, which can essentially lead to either people leaving or that there's mistrust within the organization. It keeps a very transparent layer.
Hmm. Had something to follow up with, but it slipped my mind. So until I remember, let's continue with earlier. You mentioned time, what you spend your time on. That's what I want to ask. So now that now that you have systems set up and you have everything running as you do, what is the most important thing to spend your time on currently?
Customer acquisition. And that's because our business is more or less turnkey now. And then we spent a large portion of probably Q2 this year of trying to redefine the space as to what we're going to work in. So I essentially created a spin off type company of one of the ones I was previously at. And with that, it has a certain level of expectations and a certain labeling as to where you are and what you're producing as a product. But through instances in which we've brought on customers very quickly and then realized, oh, we can't actually fulfill the needs in which you have because your business interests and our business interests didn't actually align. We then took a step back and was like, okay, what is the component and why? Because our business is turnkey. You should put it into this particular space, you advertise it in a certain way, and then it's going to work more or less out of the box in almost any context in which you would place it in. And then we did a lot of analysis on that, essentially failure, you can call it. And then we say, okay, well, let's actually relabel our and repackage our solution so we can then focus and say, all right, we're going to be this. And by doing that, that not only gave us the ability to think more globally, think more industry agnostic, it gave us an entire different customer group in which we can then go for. Predominantly, we were in the media space before. Now we have loads of different areas. We have airlines, we have hotels, we have subscription services to streaming. There's loads of different customer groups. So rather than having that sort of narrow field because of the way in which our product and service was labeled, or our business was labeled. Now we've managed to think more strategically and say, okay, let's position ourselves in a different way in which people understand and aligns more to their business goals, for us to be able to say, okay, this is the direction we want to go.
Mhm. And how do you go about acquiring those clients, if you don't mind revealing?
Yeah, so combination of different sources. I mean, existing network and referral is one of the most powerful tools you can use, assuming that you have it. You can also, if you target groups, you can start off in smaller brand segments or larger brand segments within an organization if they're a lot large enough. And then you can sort of work your way in and then work your way up. You can either go from the top and then go down, or you can go from the bottom and work your way up. Then obviously LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably one of the most powerful tools you can have in terms of business connections. However, a lot of people are inundated with loads of spam. It's like they send a connection request and be like, "Hey, buy my stuff." You've got to go away from that sort of scenario, even though you want to uh, very clearly project this is the service I'm offering. Um, do you want to buy it? You've got to be, how can I help you in your business with the product or service in which I'm providing? And a lot of people get that the opposite way around because they're just so eager to try and close on the very first message or very first meeting. Um, but LinkedIn is still quite a powerful tool. And then you've got emails, cold calling. It sort of goes in that sort of order. The industries in which I'm in, specifically within tech, people typically don't call each other, which can be advantageous. It can also be, why the fuck are you calling me?
Okay. It seems I forgot again. I had something to follow up with. So until I remember that part, let's go back to the previous one because now I remembered. When you're talking about culture and actually wanting to cultivate creativity in your employees, do you do any kind of do they need to do any kind of reflection, let's say end of day or end of week, to actually see the challenges they overcame? And do you have any kind of prompts for them to answer, or do you not operate in that way, if that makes sense?
Not fully. We operate more or less under an 80-20 rule, which is 80% of the time is work, which is like part of your job operations, and then 20% is like freedom of exploration within the company confines within different areas or like creative tasks and projects. But we also incentivize them and say, look, if there's something in which you very clearly see that there is a need, bring it forward or just start working on it. It's better to ask forgiveness rather than it is for permission in that scenario. And because there is, each potential project has a certain level of impact, it depends on how it's impacting and where it would go as to whether or not you need to escalate it further. There's always that component of self-reflection, and also from um, I'm hesitant to call it managerial perspective, but from a leadership perspective, as to how much that you should sort of say, okay, I really like the idea of your project, not really core business. Let's sort of pivot it away. So you want to try and both encourage it, but you also want to make sure that they don't stray too much down that path and just say, okay, I'm going to do this. I think Arno actually has a really great example in one of his videos about, there was an intern that they brought in that had this really good idea about structuring all the leads which will come in their database, and then he's working on that. And then the next week that he goes to him and it's like, okay, where's this database with all the leads? Oh, I had this other idea which I can like put flyers in all of their boxes. And it's sort of each week they sort of shifted focus rather than being like, okay, I've hired you for this job, please actually conduct that. So there's a fine balance there, but I think as long as you have people in which are sufficiently mature, or that you've hired the correct people within the space, they understand that balance without you having to correct them too often.
Interesting. Okay. And then now that I've remembered what I wanted to add, I'll continue with that. So since you mentioned LinkedIn and actually providing value to that person, I just wanted to clarify that yes, a lot of people when they reach out, they're like, "This is me. This is what I do," and it's from the wrong perspective because it needs to be, "This is what I can provide to you, like a value. This is the problem you have, and this is the solution that." As in, it's from it needs to be from the perspective of what you can do for them, not just what you do. And I think
Yep.
that's beginners get that wrong quite often.
Very much so. I mean, I get probably 20 people a day roughly on LinkedIn which are offering me development services. As, hey, I am Rajesh from blah services. Here is the list, the entire stack of development options in which we have
Mhm,
for you. It's like, I really don't give a shit who you are or what you're offering because you haven't exactly put forward something which is appealing for me. I think the ones
mhm,
in which I have actually responded to are the ones in which are like very clear. They've either looked on our website, they've looked on customers' websites, and they're like, okay, I see that there's something we can definitely improve upon, and that they actually create a hook. It's the same thing with advertising. It's the same thing with entertainment. Is like making sure you have that hook. And if your hook is stale or it doesn't have any bait on it in these instances, you're not going to get the bite.
mhm. Okay, I really like this. This has been, I'm pretty sure, some very valuable information for people who are in that stage of building up a business, like probably start to intermediate stage. I mean, they'll find a lot of value with everything you said. So now, with everything you've implemented in those 11 months, what has that led to in terms of income or revenue for the business?
I mean, the real ramp up came from shortly after we spoke, actually. So we went from essentially 200 and I think 210,000, and which we generated. Now, 11 months since then, we've done 2.5 million in total turnover. And that's a combination of utilizing the automation, getting new customers in, and I think identifying trends within our industry to be able to really push upon the things in which work. I think people are they're a little bit afraid when they see something which is working and they're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to leave it and not do anything. No, if something's working, you push upon that. You try and make sure you can maximize that as much as possible, and especially within e-commerce services, what we do is we essentially we find something, we test different ideas as to what we think is going to work, and then if something works, we push upon that for a period of time, and then we let it organically fall back, and then maybe a month, 2 months later, we then redo it because you're constantly trying to reintroduce ideas and new things in which you can pick up on. A lot of people make the mistake that they say we're going to hop on the latest trend. So there was the trend where everyone was getting it was like these special bouncy balls, and there was also like these oscillating fans which could spend like 13,000 spins per minute or something, or whatever is the latest thing on TikTok. Um, if you try and aim for those trends and capitalize on them, you're going to fail 9 times out of 10 because those are partially being predicted. You may get some of the residual sales which come from it, but there's other people in which are going to most likely do that faster and better than you are. What you're better off doing is finding that niche and then really capitalizing on it. And that's exactly what we've done. Because I remember in our conversation, I said that this is just the beginning, and I very much meant that. And now I've got the proof in order to say that it was just the beginning.
Right. So yeah, congratulations on that. A quite a substantial achievement. And as you said before, back then, 11 months ago, you still had renovations happening, looking after your family, and the business was just starting. So, as you said, it was very hectic. And now, basically a year later, 2.5 million in turnover, in revenue, um, and a lot more stable. Like it's insane how much can change in just 1 year, and you've seen for yourself. Yeah.
Now projections that we have now with what we're doing is we're most likely going to be able to double that within the next 12 months, if not less. And that's the point of creating that niche and that space where you really want to just accelerate and see what you can do. There's going to be a lot of exploratory systems that are there, but I think now that we've got the core part of the product, now it's about selling the business and selling the idea of the business to other people to align with their business goals, which we're being considerably better of doing now that we don't have to focus on the daily operations because the system just runs itself.
Mhm. Yep, that's how it goes. Exponential. Once everything is automated, and as you said, now the only focus is client acquisition. It's exponential the growth you'll have as long as everything keeps up. So amazing to hear. And now a bit more about any personal changes because we've only focused on business. So for you yourself in that 1 year, any kind of changes physically, mentally, spiritually, the family, anything?
Yeah, I spent a lot more time. At that point, I'd only just sort of transitioned into working full time within the business. I think I was in there for maybe 2 months or so. I was still working a consultancy job, but then came over. Um, I can't say that I work less. I work more as a entrepreneur, but you're also working towards a different goal. However, I'm much better in carving out the individual time in which I want to have. There's a balance between work and family, which I think a lot of people don't really get. Whereas I dedicate blocks of time, which is like, okay, I go and pick up my kids from school, I go and sit and I have dinner with them, and I make sure that that time that is not work time, unless there is the odd exception which comes into play. But typically, those are the times in which I spend through there. Also, trying to be networking, spending a lot more time. Went to Berlin with the council members, and then met up with a series of them there. And I think networking is a lot more underrated than I initially took it for. Before, I was very much of a lot of people would come to me for questions and ask things, and it would naturally and organically build my network. Now I'm more working specifically to both network in terms of business, but social, and also spending time with my friends. But spending time with my friends in which are like they bring you up in certain levels, because I think a lot of people will be like, oh, I've got that deadbeat friend who smokes weed and sits on the couch and plays video games. He's fun to hang out with, but he's fun to hang out with, but what do you actually get in return? Like, where is your life benefit? If you fast forward the clock a year from now, is he still going to be sitting on the couch smoking weed, playing video games? What are you going to be doing with your life? So it's segmenting your time, not rigorously. You've still got to have a level of dynamic within it, in which you then focus on, okay, what are the people in which are going to help me and be a better person in general. Um, and likewise, physically, I've also um, had some had some things I've been focusing on, both a combination of nutrition and health, like going to the gym and things like that. So it's trying to keep a balance as much as one can. And reading, as you can see behind me, I have lots and lots of different books. This is just a fraction of the books in which I have, and I think learning is a cornerstone. Like you can't just sit on your laurels and say, okay, I know this is where I want to do. Like, you can always learn something new, and therefore it's always good to take either inspiration from books, from series, from wherever. But I like specifically with books, because then I can take it and I can remove myself from a screen or my phone or something like that, and all the distractions, because I know that if I sit here, I am going to work. If I have my phone, I am going to work. Whereas if I put these aside and I go and read a book somewhere else, I'm not going to be distracted.
Mhm. Right. So yeah, it's about balance. And balance doesn't always mean 50-50, one thing or the other. It's just a balance to where you'll have the longevity to continue doing, in your case, let's say work, you know you need to scale work, but that doesn't mean you need to be doing 100% of the time. Maybe if you take 15 or 20% of that time and put it into family, gym, reading books, then that will allow you to actually have the longevity to continue doing what you're doing for 10 years plus instead of burning out. So in a way, it's still part of work. You could even frame it that way. like actually
Yeah.
finding a balance there.
I mean, everything is work if you put it down to it. I mean, it's work to have a relationship. It's work to look after your kids. It's work to go to the kitchen and cook a meal. And it's all a level of like, where do you want to put that work and what do you value the most? There's no rigidity to life. Everything is very, very fluid. And I think you should listen to the different components of life that you need to. If you are sick, like within reason, of course, go and lie on the couch, go and sleep, go and recover. Because if you're operating at 20 or 30% of what you should be, because, oh, I really have to get this done, but it's due in like 3 days, go and lie on the couch, go and sleep for a couple of hours. You're going to come back and you're going to feel considerably rested and you'll probably get 40, 50% done comparatively to what you were before.
Mhm. And let's continue with, since you're on this trajectory, where do you see your life heading in short term, medium term, long term?
I mean, I've made no secret of the idea of that in about 5 years, yeah, of the total 5 to 7 years in the total growth of this company, that I plan to make an exit. I think a business should always be built surround the idea of essentially bus factor, which bus factor is if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, that the business is still going to run without me. Likewise, the key personnel in which are within the organization. And when you build a business with that idea and mindset, then you're able to remove yourself from it and potentially pass that on to others. And that's ultimately what I want to be able to do with this. Granted, if I continue to enjoy the ride like I have been, then I may stick around with it. But I have the quite a ambitious goal in mind to be able to sell it for in a short space of time. We're very well positioned to do it. So the goal is approximately about $200 million.
Amazing. And very achievable with the trajectory you're on. So great to hear. And then, since this began in the real world, well, began would be the wrong way to say it. Since the real world contributed to this, what advice would you have to people who are considering joining but are unsure if it's a scam?
I mean, scam is what you make of it. I mean, a lot of people will spend the equivalent of what the real world costs, which is $49 for lunch, or they'll go out and have like 3 drinks, and that's the equivalent on it. It's it's one of those rare instances in which you buy it, you try it. If it doesn't work for you, then you can go out of it. But there is so many levels to what is available there. I mean, if you're just starting out and you don't know where to go in terms of you want to create a business, you can find it there. If you're interested in crypto or stocks, you can go to the crypto or stock campus and learn the ins and outs from a complete beginner to advanced trading expert. You want to go and learn about fitness or health or e-commerce or copywriting. There is so many different business aspects. I mean, if I was in my 20s or even before then, of hell, if I was like 14 and I found this, I would be like a gazillionaire by now just by the stuff in which is there. It's ridiculous. And I think there's the fact that there is people in which have actually done what they're doing within the space and can prove that they've done it is a huge testament. It's not like the YouTube gurus is here's make $10,000 a month. It's no, let's start at your pace. Like if you're in a shack in Bangladesh and you have a mobile phone and you've got a piece of tin over your head, like let's get you out of the shack. Like let's set realistic goals, not 10,000 a month. Let's make 100 a month or 500 or 1,000, and then build yourself up incrementally. And it gives you all these different ways. So if I was like dropped in the middle of nowhere and had to like fend for myself and try and like rebuild a business, I know they've got the what is it, Grant Cardone billionaire series where he gets dropped in the middle of nowhere and he has to make like $100,000 business or something.
Not sure.
If I was dropped in the middle of nowhere and I had a phone, the real world would be the first app that I would install. because that will give me all the knowledge and everything that I could possibly need in order to be able to make it.
Mhm. That's a very interesting analogy there, or perspective you give. So yeah, haven't heard that one before, but completely makes sense. Very cool way of saying it. And yeah, Travis, 40 minutes flew by. Where did time go? But
Time
the
flies when you're
insane
having
value
fun.
here. Pardon? Time
Time flies
flies.
when you're having fun.
So yeah, having some insane value here for people. I know I learned some new things myself. So thank you for coming on and sharing everything you've learned and your experience and for updating on your progress. And would be great to do another one, let's say in another year. Because again, with the trajectory you're on, I'm sure we'll have some even more insane value to give to people, as long as you'll be willing. So
That's the
thank
plan.
you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.